Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keelan.
And this is Zenith, that podcast with Space Vikings. Because this week we watched The Keeper.
Written by Alan Pryor.
Directed by Derek Martinez.
And aired on March 27th, 1979.
Yeah, so once again, as a reminder, we're in between seasons of Doctor Who.
Right, I think we forgot to mention that.
I think we forgot to mention that last week, but we did the week before.
That's okay, because there's no Doctor Who even airing at this point.
So
maybe we should start, maybe when Doctor Who isn't airing, and I don't know if that's ever going to be the case again, probably next season, we can go into like what other, because I think the initial request that we got was to mention other sci-fi shows that were airing. Mm-hmm. So we can maybe look up some other ones that were airing at the time.
For sure. Just to get a little bit of historical context, I guess.
Sure.
Alan Pryor, third most prolific writer for Doctor Who. Doctor Who, Blake Seven coming back to write another script.
Yeah, really delivered this time. This was a really good story.
I mean, I want to just throw a shout out to Derek Martinez for basically giving us one of the best directed episodes of Blake Seven so far, in my opinion.
I don't know, that close-up shot on Jenna's eyes actually really freaked me out.
Yeah, maybe that was the point, though.
I agree. I really liked a lot of the
especially
stuff,
at the start
stuff.
Here, I really know we
at the end.
get this really great shot that I don't think Blake Seven or even any show around this time had attempted before, but it's like a long take, basically a long single take of the Liberator Bridge with people coming in and out of frame talking, and it feels like really natural and fluid, like these people are moving around the bridge, coming into frame, coming out of frame, and there's like almost no cuts at all in this long take.
You know, I didn't even notice that, and I don't even remember it, but sure.
Because the camera pans around from the seats down to the lower right where Blake is talking with Avon and Villa and like preparing his provisions, and then Villa goes off and it zooms out a little bit, and Jenna and Callie are standing to the side and talks with him, and they move around the box, and then it zooms back in when Blake comes back to talk with them, and Avon's talking about taking over the Federation. I just thought it was really well done.
Sure. Yeah, I'll have to go back and watch it because, again, I don't even remember it. I do remember what Blake and Avon talk about in this scene, though, which is that, you know, if Blake gets control of Star One, then instead of destroying it, you know, he can basically run the Federation from there.
And Blake was like,
he says something along the lines of that much power would corrupt anyone.
Avon's like, Blake's afraid that power would corrupt, and Blake's like, that much power could corrupt anyone. And Avon's just like, right.
Which, you know, maybe we're already seeing some of power corrupting like, Blake.
Phil's like, I could be president. Now that's something worth fighting for. Let's go. So they beam down to the planet. Blake, Villa, and Jenna beam down.
Yeah, Jenna getting to go down.
Jenna getting to stretch her legs.
We'll see what they do with Jenna in this story.
Avon then spots a ship on the scanner and is like, it's Travis, Callie, quick, we can go, we can kill Travis.
Well, because what they're doing is Dockley told them about where he hid the clue to where Star One is.
Right.
Which is on the necklace or pendant or whatever of one of these nobles.
On this planet.
I'm forgetting what the planet is called.
Let's look it up. It's Goth. The name of the planet is Goth.
Right, and the people are the Goths.
Yeah.
Gonna
dock some points. From Alan Pryor there. He's basically out Terry Nationing Terry Nation at that point.
Well, I mean, this is a little ahead of where we are right now, but once we get into their tents or Thane encampment, Thane halls, even though they weren't long halls, they first of all, I think it's. What was the guy in charge's name? Was that Rod? Or,
no, Rod was his brother.
Yeah, Rod was the brother.
And I have things to say about that name.
That it just means red,
Gola.
same as Raj. Right, so Gola says, like, he says basically something along the lines of, we've inherited stuff from the past. We're taking all this culture from the past and we're doing it over again. I mean, at least he's at least entrenched in, like, a society that does that, even if he's not knowledgeable as to like how that originally started, because everyone there seems pretty set in like living in this way. You know, they're not like Civil War reenactors or anything. But there's also, interestingly, there's stuff from all over the world, or at least like in the throne room, it's a lot of like very European old style artifacts, like even pre-Roman and stuff like that. Yeah. But then I don't know if you noticed, but when they get into like Servalan's room and stuff, there are like things that look distinctly African.
Yeah, Servalan's room looks completely different.
Yeah, so really interesting there, and I kind of wish they fleshed out what this society is even more. That it looks like they're taking stuff from all over the place. Do they? So maybe.
I mean, it's possibly a corruption of like the historical records, and they're like, "Oh man, this
exactly.
is part of this, or this is part of this," but when it actually wasn't,
and that's kind of really interesting to me.
Yeah, like reconstructing what they think this culture was like.
And again, maybe they're not even the ones doing that. Maybe their ancestors were the ones who tried to reconstruct this a certain culture, failing at it, and then now that's how they're just living, which is a really interesting concept to me, and they don't really dive into that too much.
I mean, they wouldn't even know that they're wrong when they reconstruct the culture.
No, they wouldn't.
Though, so it's not like they're just accepting it. It's more like they think this is what it is, so they're doing it.
And that's really interesting to me. But again, they don't really go into that. There's other things they have to do in this story, like get the codes.
I mean, we've had like hints of that before on Blake 7, though. Like, what was the one before Gan died?
Horizon?
Horizon.
Not in the same way, though.
And we had the governor who was going to be like put in as a puppet governor in that story, which we keep mentioning, but I can never remember the name of. Bounty.
Yeah,
he was like... He had all those guns, and he had that castle full of just antiques that he was like collecting.
Yeah. So I mean, there are definitely people interested in ancient society, which is either from our era or before
even
that.
earlier.
But yeah, I wish they dove into it a little more.
I mean, it's a cool science fiction. It's like a concept that you can only do in science fiction, right? Like a future society finding present day or historical items, and
you can't only do it in science. You can do like a lost colony thing that's just on Earth.
Yeah, but I feel like that to an extent is science fiction because it's like alternate history, right? I consider alternate history to be a subsect of science fiction.
Yeah, well, my ideas about what science fiction even is I have some opinions on that. So, I mean, I guess we can just get into it. I think, because it might be kind of interesting, I just consider science fiction any fiction that deals with science. That's why I consider books like As I Lay Dying and Crime and Punishment be science fiction. Because to me, science fiction is more of a lens than an actual thing. I mean, look, science fiction, fantasy horror, even concepts like the early modern era, right, with like Shakespeare and stuff like that are quote unquote genres designed to market stuff to you, right? Mm-hmm. So I typically see science fiction as more of a lens to look at something. You can look at something like a book like As I Lay Dying, which to me is all about linguistics. Which is a science. So if you look at it through that lens, if you get into the linguistic concepts that are in that book, then you're dealing with science in the story. So to me, it's science fiction.
Well, I mean, I agree with science fiction being anything that deals with science, but I guess in this context, where we differ would be what we consider science, because you said linguistics is a science, which it is, but it's not like a hard science like chemistry or biology or physics. And in my mind, like science fiction is like it deals with science, but it has to deal with biology or chemistry or physics in some way.
So then you basically don't agree that Ursula K. Le Guin's stories are science fiction.
I haven't read any of her stories, so I'm not going to make any determination on that. So I don't know.
Yeah, I hear that's what a lot of people say. They're like, it has to deal with hard science, and I completely disagree with that. Totally.
I mean, but like...
So
where do you consider the dividing line?
Like new wave, what you're saying is like new wave science fiction isn't science fiction.
Or maybe it isn't, but where do you consider the dividing line between what is science and what isn't then? Because, like, what is science?
Yeah, that's also a good question. I mean, I think we've talked about it before on this show, but like people use words art and science these days to, I think, there's been some corruption in those words, which is fine. Like languages change. Only languages aren't changing are languages that are dead. Like not originally, but like etymologically, whatever. Science and art, like science is knowledge, art is skill. So, I mean, if you want to just say that science is all knowledge, then what isn't science fiction?
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. Then it's like, why even delineate it as science fiction? Why not just delineate it just as fiction?
Well, look, I also...
Right.
And again, this is why I also say that science fiction is like a marketing thing too, in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And I think that like science fiction is a you said that you see, what would you say something is a subset of science fiction?
Alternate history.
Yeah, alternate history. I see science fiction as a subset of fantasy because I see that, Actually, that's not true. Earlier I said As I Lay Dying I see it as a science fiction story, but I don't see it as like a fantastic story, right? Because there's nothing in that story that happens that couldn't like happen in the real world or the given world. All that stuff, all the stuff in the story is pretty realistic, or stuff that could at least happen. Which is why I see that as a science fiction story, but not a fantastic one like Blake 7.
Right.
So I don't know.
Well, then maybe where we disagree then is that I consider science fiction maybe not necessarily hard science, but has to deal with something that couldn't happen in the world as it is today. It has to require changing the world somehow, and that's why I consider fantasy and science fiction. I don't consider science fiction to be a subsect of fantasy, but I consider fantasy and science fiction to both be kind of two different subsects of this further umbrella term, which is like
the fantastic.
Yeah, the fantastic fiction, which is not like, something like, I haven't read As I Lay Dying, but I've read Sound and the Fury. So like Sound and the Fury, like that's something that could happen in the real world. There's nothing.
Sound and the Fury to me doesn't deal with
linguistics.
Sound and the Fury deals with linguistics, but not to this. Maybe it deals with some other science, but not to the extent that As I Lay Dying does. As I Lay Dying to me is all about linguistics.
Right, but I mean, to me, if the story deals with something that could happen or could have happened in present day, like historical fiction, then I don't consider that science fiction or fantasy. To me, science fiction and fantasy is a subsect of just fiction in general. That's like fiction that deals with things that don't happen in our universe or don't happen in the universe as it is now. That's why like historical fiction is to me a subsect of science fiction, because it's like most of history is the same, but something is different, so it can't possibly happen in our world.
Sure, and I mean, all right. I can't agree that like books that are not books. I'm totally stuck on books, I guess, just because of how much I read. But I can't agree that stories that deal with soft science are not science fiction. I basically cannot accept that.
Well, because you're in the soft sciences, though, or you study it to some extent. You've studied etymology and linguistics to some extent, right?
Yeah, but
so
even linguistics is in a weird area to me. I wouldn't even consider that a soft science. And again, I don't even know like if I agree with using the term soft science and hard science. But like if we're going to, and like I guess we should at this point. Linguistics to me is in a weird area. I definitely see like psychology and stuff as like soft science. I don't know where linguistics falls. Maybe some like middle ground or something.
I mean, I see linguistics almost as historical science, if I'm going to be honest.
I don't know. I don't think we need to even...
And then it's like also like political science is
political,
a soft science.
Well, I don't know. Political science is usually grouped with the humanities.
I mean, and some people even delineate science fiction as hard sci-fi and soft sci-fi. Which,
I mean
almost sounds like what you're doing, except you're lumping them into one sci-fi. You're including soft sci-fi and hard sci-fi.
Well, there's also the terms science fiction and science fantasy.
Science fantasy has always been weird to me because I've always been like, what is science fantasy? Because
well, again, it gets back to this thing where it's, to me, like not all science fiction has to be fantastic. There's some that is and there's some that isn't. Like to me, Star Wars is science fiction and it's also fantasy. But
I consider Star Wars science fantasy.
But that's why I don't need that term science fantasy, because I just think some science fiction is also fantasy and some isn't. And not all fantasy is science fiction, because not all fantasy deals with science.
I mean, I think we just have fundamentally different viewpoints on what science fiction is.
Just read more.
It's not like it's going to change my viewpoint.
No, it might, because
I mean, it might, but you don't know that.
That's my cop-out.
As you always say, it might, but we can't know.
Yeah, I mean, I just think reading more is necessarily going to change it, like, basically guaranteed. But yeah, you're right, we can't know. Anyway, that's my cop-out answer for, like, anytime someone disagrees with me, I was like, well, just read more. Like, you haven't read as much as I have. Which is sadly true.
You haven't watched as much movies or television as me, right?
No, that's true. So and I haven't even, look, I'm saying this also as a joke. I haven't even read that much compared to a lot of other people. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just my joke answer for like, just read more.
I mean, it's also like a logical fallacy, though, that answer really. It's like almost an ad hominem attack. I mean, not that that's a bad thing, I guess. Logical fallacies... People think fallacy has like a negative connotation. Logical fallacies, you can use them in an effective way, but anyway.
Yeah, it's all just a part of rhetoric.
Then it's also the fallacy where like
calling out the fallacy is a fallacy.
Where you call out the fallacy and you think that makes you right. That's a fallacy in and of itself. Anyway,
Whatever.
So
none of this is important to the sheer enjoyment that you can get out of this episode of Blake 7, which is at least more than I got out of Gambit.
Wow. What a low bar. Avon basically decides to go blow up Travis's ship.
Based on what people were saying on Twitter in response to me, Gambit is like really well loved.
The Gambit episode hasn't gone out when we're recording this, and people are going to be really disappointed in our Gambit episode. I don't know. I didn't really like this episode as much as you did either, but we're going to get into that later. Avon blows up Travis's ship.
Yeah,
he thinks Travis is on it, and he's like, yeah,
Callie's
I did it, boys.
Look, Avon, we can't leave. We're going to be out of teleport range, because they know that the Goths live on this planet, and they say that they give some of the backstory, they give some of the info on the planet. I think Avon does, as is usually his job. Mm-hmm. He says that the Goths live underground because staying above ground for any extended period of time will basically kill you.
Yeah. They mentioned that when they teleport down.
They don't get it. Now that I bring that back up, now that I think about it again, they don't really use that in any way in this story. They just go underground.
No, and it reminds me of... What does it remind me of?
In Hostage, when they didn't use the thin oxygen level of the planet.
Yeah. Or Fallout, the video games, where you can barely ever go on the surface because irradiated. Or that episode of Star Trek where the entire planet's been bombed out so they can't stay on the surface, so they live underground. This is a concept that's been done hundreds of times over in fiction in general. The surface of the planet is uninhabited, so they live underground, but they barely do anything in the story at all.
Yeah, I didn't see why it was even a part of the story. Other than that, it was. Yeah, I didn't see why it was interesting, but I didn't see why it was necessary. Anyway, like we mentioned, Blakeville and Jenna go down. Mm-hmm. And Avon and Callie go off to destroy Travis's ship.
Yeah.
And Callie's like, we can't do this, Avon. Come on, man. We can't get out of teleport.
So this is the thing that actually, this was one thing that bugged me about the story, is that the first time they go to destroy a ship, Avon uses Zen to plot a course, and Callie's like, what the heck? And Avon's like, we're doing it. Don't fight with Zen or me. But then the second time, Avon asks Callie to plot the course of the ship, and she refuses to do it, and Avon just accepts this instead of doing what he did the first time and asking Zen to plot the course instead.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, wasn't Servalan on the second ship? Wouldn't they have been able to kill Servalan if they'd...
It was Travis on the second ship.
Oh, okay.
Travis takes Servalan's ship to go get the patrol.
Yeah.
They would have actually killed Travis if they'd gone for the second ship.
Yeah, that's what they were doing. They were going for this, or they were doing this thing where it's like...
Well, what bugged me, though, is that Avon uses Zen to plot the course the first time over Callie's protests, and the second time when Callie protests because he directly asked Callie to set the course, he doesn't just go overhead and use Zen. He doesn't... It just seems inconsistent to me.
Well, I think because he was wrong the first time, he's like, all right, fine.
Well, he didn't know he was wrong, though.
Oh, well.
He assumed Travis was on that ship till the end of the story when Blake was... Or not Blake, but Jenna and Villa were like, we saw Travis down on the planet.
I guess, that's true. Well, whatever.
And then even still... He thinks Servalan's on that ship, not Travis, because it's Servalan's ship that's leaving the planet.
This is all very confusing, but...
It just seemed inconsistent to me that Avon would go over Callie's head the first time and use Zen, but the second time he wouldn't. And the only reason, really, that I can see why he wouldn't the second time is because he would have actually killed Travis, and they can't kill Travis off yet on the show, just like that. From an out-of-universe perspective.
All right. Anyway... That's not a very big part of the episode.
It's big in that. Well, it's big in the aspect that Blake is like, Avon, teleport, because they jumped by some dudes.
Yeah, they're just wandering through the woods, I guess, and some Goths show up and start attacking them. They have this big fight scene. Blake is getting choked. Villa's just off to the side, hiding, but not even hiding that well.
Yeah.
And they're like, wait a minute, there's another guy over there. So they go attack him.
And Villa actually escapes. Briefly.
Yeah, Villa...
He's trying to call for teleport, and then eventually they get back in teleport range just when Blake calls for teleport, and they beam him up, and they're like, what happened to Villa and Jenna? And he's like, you bloody idiots, let them get captured because you were somewhere else. And Avon's like, well, we just killed Travis. And Blake is like, if Travis was even on the ship. And Avon's like, shoot.
Yeah, so it's not at the end where he doesn't know whether Travis is on the ship or not, but he starts questioning it.
But even still, the second ship was Servalan's ship, and Servalan is not Travis.
Whatever. Blake goes back down to the planet to
He
go
tells
help
them
him
if
out.
he's not up in 6 hours, they need to come down themselves. Orak doesn't show up in this story, by the way. Just wanted to point that out.
That's fine. He didn't necessarily.
Zen didn't show
need
up
to be-
last week, so
No, but Orak didn't necessarily need to be in this.
no, he didn't.
So Blake goes back down to the planet to go try and rescue Jenna and Villa, and he runs into Rod.
All right, when he meets Rod,
Both of their names mean red, right? Like Raj.
yeah.
red,
But
Rod
what I
is
was going to
also
go
red.
for with like, so there's Gola and Tara. Gola's the chief, and Tara's his sister, and they've all got like really sci-fi-esque names. And this guy's like, "Hey, my name's Rod."
Well, I mean, look, Blake 7 has always done that. There's Olag Avon and Olag Gan,
And then there's Rod.
and then there's Jenna Stannis. There's like a totally normal name.
I just burst out laughing. This guy's like, "My name is Rod." Brian Blessed would have totally fit right in this story. The story,
Rod?
No, just as anybody.
Or as Gola? Probably as Gola.
Because like these also reminded me of
Cygnus Alpha?
It's the Doctor Who story where Perry gets killed, but she's not actually killed, and it's got Brian Blessed as King Yakarnos.
Oh, Mind Warp.
Mind Warp. That's why I think Brian Blessed would have been good in this story, because it reminded me a lot of King Yakarnos, Rod, and
really?
Gola. To an
Well,
extent.
King Yakarnos was based on, wasn't he based on like, what do they call
I don't know, but just like the king being deposed and having to fight back and challenge them for his kingdom.
yeah, sure. This was a lot more enjoyable than Mind Warp.
And also like the
it didn't
overacting
have
that was
Syl.
very Brian Blessed in style.
Yeah, all right. Anyway, they're taking underground. We get, I think, a CSO shot of
Yes.
the caverns, which was done very sketchily, but I think it needed to
worked.
be. I think it needed to be in there because otherwise they're just taken into this room, and you never
Yeah.
get the impression that they're underground.
Yeah. This is... Oh, yeah. We find out, unlike everybody else in the story, that Travis is alive immediately, because right after Avon's like, "We got him," it's like smash cut to Travis standing next to Gola like, "Hey, what's up, Gola?"
I think we see Gola sort of torturing his fool or whatever, and then Travis walks in and he's like, "So, hey, what's new, Gola?"
Yeah, because his fool is like apparently being really bad and not entertaining him.
Yeah, bad as in he's like not doing a good job of
Yeah.
entertaining him.
And Tara's his sister apparently like breathes in these fumes that let her see the future.
Yeah.
And
Well, to her, as far as she says,
except every prediction she makes in the story is 100% right. So,
well, and she also takes the throne at the end, which is really interesting.
well, because everybody else who could is dead.
Yeah, I mean, I guess she foresaw all of this.
Maybe she put it in motion. Maybe
Yeah,
she's
this-
Dalek Khan of the story.
This reminded me of the episode of The Prisoner, which I've been going back to a lot lately for some reason. Not watching it, but just going back and thinking about it. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's because it's like one of the only British shows I've watched from like even remotely this era. There's like Doctor Who, that, and like a couple other ones that I've never finished. But there's this one episode where this assistant who plays like this sort of she plays a role similar to like what Jenna does in this episode, and at the very end she just slaps number 6 in the face, or number 6, and then she becomes like the new number 2 for that episode. And if you know like what the show is about, then you know like what that means. But
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
okay, yeah. And it's done really well. That's like my favorite episode of that show.
Yeah. I mean, reminds me of this episode of Star Trek
election
Enterprise, which
episode,
I
I think.
literally just watched like 2 days ago. Actually, yesterday. In the mirror universe, where basically everybody advances up the ranks by just killing their superiors and taking their place. So over the course of the
Just
episode,
like real life.
the captain of the ship gets replaced twice because the initial captain gets overthrown by a mutiny, and then that captain stays in power till right at the end when he gets overthrown again by someone else. It's it's interesting. You only advance through the ranks by just killing your superior and taking their place at that point, because everybody wants to hold power for themselves and not give it away.
Well, a lot of what this culture is based on like northern culture and like Beowulf type stuff with Thanes, and well, I mean, this extends far beyond Beowulf, but like to most like people who are familiar with English lit and stuff like that, Beowulf is the big one, right? And Beowulf is also awesome, so go ahead and read it if you haven't. Read the translation by Seamus Heaney, who is, I think, the poet laureate or of some Ireland or something. I don't know. But he's like pretty famous, and his translation is modern and good.
I read Beowulf in middle school, but I don't remember what translation I read, and I remember it being kind of weird and dull.
Yeah. Well, Seamus Haney one is really interesting. Oh yeah, so it's kind of like the Thane sort of world. There's this poem.
I mean, the planet is literally called Goth.
Yeah, there's this poem. There's actually a lot of poems that still survive from this era about like warriors who like shamed themselves and they have to go wander like the icy wastes by themselves. And so like fighting and stuff is a huge part of this type of
culture.
Call back to this culture.
Right. I mean, it's
and
that
I
idea.
don't know. I don't know a lot about where women fit into this, because a lot of these poems and stuff, and especially Beowulf, also they're not mentioned. I think the only female in Beowulf is Grendel's mom.
Yeah.
So this episode is doing some interesting stuff with that. I think.
Kind of. I mean, really, the only woman in this is
Tara and Jenna.
And Tara. Servalan shows up, but she just shows up to
Callie
to run around and be like, ha ha ha.
Well, yeah. Tara and Jenna are the main ones in this.
Right. The story also, like, I guess, retcons the retcon from last week.
What?
Because now Servalan and Travis are working together again.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, a lot of this, I'm not 100% sure on this, but it seems like a lot of this is a result of the weird production order and shuffling in that.
Yeah, it really just reinforces the idea that I had last week, the theory that I had that last week's episode was supposed to take place before Travis's trial in some way.
Yeah, and I'm okay with this in that light.
Yeah.
Like, did it work out well in the end? No, but
I mean,
whatever.
It's actually entirely possible it does take place before Travis's trial and just aired later. I mean, I don't think there's any... Is there something in Gambit that railroads it into being set later?
Yeah, because they're looking for the code.
For Star 1?
Yeah. That's the only thing.
Yeah, I guess I guess that kind of throws a wrench in the system, doesn't it?
Yep.
Damn.
It was so perfect.
It was, briefly.
Anyway,
Blake and Rod. Rod's like, I'm going to go gather my men. You're an enemy of Travis and Servalan and my brother, right? And he's like, yeah. So then he's like, good, we'll go fight them. You wait here in the dungeon while I gather up my men.
He says, I have to go fight my brother, and then immediately you get a shot of Gola. So you're like, okay, Gola is Rod's brother.
I mean, you can figure it out pretty easily, I think.
That's how it's pretty well telegraphed, so.
It's also telegraphed, to me, what made me figure it out is that Gola refers to Tara as his sister and doesn't refer to anyone else by their familiar relations. So to have Rod refer to someone specifically as his brother, I was like...
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So... Basically, not a lot happens in this middle section, except for Jenna
there's a lot
trying...
of sort of character interactions. Yeah. Villa is brought in. He's made the new jester. I guess just his entire appearance and demeanor is like, you're the new jester.
First, Jenna goes to Tara and is like, do you know who the keeper is? And there's this weird scene with Tara and Jenna, and feels like there's a lot of sexual tension in this scene for some reason.
Well, first of all, Gola decides to take Jenna as his, like, wife.
Pair bond mate.
Right, his pair bond mate.
Because they have to get those extra seconds into the story, so they make the phrase 3 times longer.
But right, Jenna goes and confronts Tara. We're skipping a scene with Travis and Servalan, but we'll get back to that. Mm-hmm. And this scene actually really freaked me out. This was one of the scariest. It was almost a jump scare even, because it just like there's this instant shot like that's zoomed in on Jenna's eyes, and Sally Nivette is like, her eyes are as wide as they can possibly be, and like it just freaked me out.
Yeah, no.
And she's moving her head like, I don't know, some demonic...
Well, because she can't move her hands. She's like really confused because Tara like stops her from moving her hands somehow.
And based on what Dockley told them, the information is on a pendant, and they don't know whether that pendant is around the neck of Gola or Tara.
Yeah, because right now the only 2 nobles they know about are Gola or Tara. And once you figure out that Rod is Gola's brother, you're like, oh, it could also be Rod.
So
and
it's one of the 3.
In fact, when you realize Rod is Gola's brother, you're like, it's probably Rod. Yeah. To me, I was like, it's definitely Rod. That's going to be the big twist, is it's on Rod, but the twist gets even weirder.
Yeah.
So Jenna checks Tara's pendant, and there's nothing.
Yep. So she's like, oh, it must be on Gola's. So we have to get as close to it as possible. And this is where she starts sort of play acting as Gola's pair bond mate And he falls for it, surprisingly, because it's, a really terrible act. There's like no way anyone with half a brain wouldn't see through it immediately, but Gola is convinced.
Gola was the only one who needed to be convinced.
Right.
Servalan is like, yo. Servalan talks with Travis. Travis is like, look, I'm going to go get some pursuit ships because they blew up my ship. I'm going to use your ship. And Servalan's okay. So Travis leaves, and we don't see Travis for the rest of the story. And then the only other time we see Servalan in the story is right now when Gola and Sally are, I guess, playing like space chess, and Servalan's like, she let you win.
Yeah, well, I really like this one line between Servalan and Travis, because Travis goes, "Don't you trust me, Servalan?" And she's like, no, of course not.
She said that before, I think.
I don't remember it, so I really liked it here. They bring up IQ at some point
right
during
now
this.
when she talks about Sally letting Gola win, and Servalan's like, she's like one of the highest ranked intelligence people we had in the Federation. She let you win, and Gola's like, what?
It's like that's interesting. They still use IQ.
Yeah.
Even though
IQ is not really a
of
measurement of
favor.
intelligence. Yeah.
Well, it's
always been a measure more of problem solving, but like really specific logic problems. It's not really a measure of your intelligence at all.
IQ is also like really caught up in language. People who natively speak Indo-European languages will basically almost always do better on IQ tests than people whose first languages are non-Indo-European.
This is a lot of problem solving, and if you don't understand a language, it's really difficult to solve the problem.
Well,
or if you don't have a good grasp of the language, like if you understand it but you don't understand a lot of the nuances, it's really difficult to solve problems.
Well, I mean, like even if you take an IQ test written in English and you translate it into a non-Indo-European language, just like the ways Indo-European languages work, I think mean that like people whose first language is not an Indo-European language are not going to do as well on the test, just like all across the board.
Yeah, I think so.
But it's interesting. I think a lot of this stuff wasn't like known or acknowledged back in the 70s, because like even now IQ is like really falling out of favor as like a thing to measure.
Unless you're Mensa, I guess.
I don't know what that is.
Mensa is like an association or a group for people with high IQ. The joke is always like, how do you know someone's a member of Mensa? Well, they'll tell you. Because people who are part of Mensa usually like to flash that badge as much as they can.
What do you get for being a part of it? Just bragging
Recognition,
rights?
bragging rights. You get to meet up with other members of Mensa. You should go to the Mensa subreddit, actually. It's like a good microcosm of what people who are part of Mensa are, because just people bragging about their IQ, and they're like, went to a Mensa meetup today, guys. It was nice to talk with people who are on the same intelligence level as me. And I'm like, what the hell?
Well, I don't even go on Reddit, thankfully, and I probably won't start.
So
the
fool throws his voice to get Villa thrown in jail.
Yeah.
And Jenna fakes the wine being poisoned to get the fool thrown in jail so they can bring Villa back.
That was funny. I mean, we should probably talk about Sally Nivette during this, because based on what she said about the show and like her role, especially in Series B, I'm assuming she freaking hated this episode, right?
I would assume so. I mean, that's kind of actually the impression I got from the acting in the episode, was that she like really hated this episode.
I think she does a good job. She does a professional job of doing what she's supposed to be doing, which is, at least in this episode, playing a badass smuggler who's pretending to be like this docile, sort of stereotypical female role. Right. Which, I don't know, like...
It's badass smuggler playing what she thinks Gola wants, which turns out to be actually what Gola wants.
In some ways, that's more forgivable than what Sally Nivette has criticized the show for doing before, which is just making her like, the quote-unquote eye candy in the shot.
I guess, but this is almost a continuation of that, isn't it?
It is.
She's playing up that very, I guess, coy, playful, kind of sexualized woman that
she didn't want to play.
That Gola wants, that she didn't want to play, that she didn't think had any place in this show.
Right.
At all, right? I mean, this is a show based around like characters who are really strong and independent and not like stereotypical.
It's based around like a team of criminals, and she's a smuggler.
And they're not. What I'm saying is they're not like stereotypical in any way. And this is like
I don't know about that, but
this is like a big stereotype. At least it was back in the day. The sexualized eye candy who's just there to look pretty and
sure.
and just
Yeah,
be in frame.
I mean, I'm not. In some ways, I'm apologizing for it. Do I think it was a great decision? Maybe not, but I don't know. I just can't help but think that in some ways this is less egregious than what we've seen so far, which is because she's playing Jenna, playing this character. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think it could be seen as less egregious also because it's part of the actual plot of the story that Jenna herself plays it this way.
Yep.
And it's not actually how Jenna is, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's the possibility that Celine Yvette really loved this because she got to play Jenna playing this and got to be like, see, look.
Somehow I haven't looked up anything that she said about this episode or anything, or haven't seen anything, but somehow I doubt that.
Yeah, I really doubt that too. But we don't know, I guess, is my point.
Nope.
But I think based on what she said that she probably really hated this. Playing it like this, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's not who Jenna is. It's Jenna playing it, I guess is what we're saying.
Yeah.
Not that necessarily makes it any better, but anyway.
No. Anyway, Villa gets taken off. He's like, "No, it wasn't me. I didn't do it. I swear."
This is kind of hilarious. The guard just walks over, picks him up like fireman carry style, and carries him down to the dungeon.
The guy who plays the fool is really good at throwing his voice and sounding like Villa.
Yeah, like Michael Keaton. And while he's in the basement, Villa sees Blake, and Blake's like, "Yo, what's going on?" Also, there's this old crazy man in the basement, and Blake's like, "Just shut up, dude. What are you doing here?" Yeah,
he encounters the dungeons are in this underground area, and he encounters the old dude, and he's like, "Yeah, whatever," just ignores him.
And then Villa gets taken back up, and then Villa really cunningly tells Jenna that Blake's below, but he's like, "Look at this rope and the ring on it. There's no break above. There's a Blake below." And Jenna's like, "Ah." And it didn't really matter for him to tell her that because then Rod shows up and Blake and Rod kind of just metaphorically kick the door down and we're like, "It's us. We're back. We're coming to take the throne."
So they decide to fight, Rod and Gola, that is, and they use this sort of, I guess, medieval style weapon. I tried to find out what this weapon was, but I couldn't find the name of it. It's basically, on one hand, you have a spiked glove, basically, like a spiked boxing glove, and you're chained to the other person as well.
By your other hand.
Yeah, by your other hand.
Yeah, I thought this was... I recognized this weapon, too. I was like, I'm sure this is some sort of medieval weapon of some sort.
Yeah, I tried looking it up. I couldn't find out what it was called. I just kept running into, like, Morning Star
it's like,
and
Morning Star is like the spiky ball on the end of a chain.
Yeah. I don't know. I tried looking at like medieval spiked glove or something like that, and I couldn't find it. But
I don't really know, but yeah, like I recognized it.
Let us know.
But what I did think it was really dangerous to wave these spiky boxing gloves around in this room where your spectators are like not 3 feet away from you. I was expecting someone to get like impaled.
I mean, did you think it was just it was like just
no? But I'm saying like in the context of like the story,
in the story,
wouldn't they like go outside or something so that they could be away from all these other people who are standing really close and avoid like collateral damage?
Didn't care.
Because they like jump around the whole room and everything. Anyway,
yeah, they're jumping off tables and stuff like that.
There's a moment where Rod,
really cool fight. I actually
where Rod
really
has Gola like right at his mercy. All he has to do is thrust forward and stab him, like when he's lying down next to Jenna, right at the start of the battle too. And he just doesn't for some reason. Then they fight some more, and Rod ends up dying.
Yep, and he actually like gets choked instead of getting stabbed. He chokes him with the chain.
And then he stabs him at the end.
Tara actually also prophesied that.
She prophesied that if Gola took Jenna as his pair bond mate, he wouldn't be happy because his brother would come back and they would both die. She doesn't say they would kill each other because Gola asks if that means they'll kill each other, and she says, "I don't know, but you both will die."
Yeah.
So what happens is he kills Rod, and then he drinks poisoned wine.
Yep.
And
Croaks.
dies. And they check both Rod and Gola's necks and like, damn, who the hell has the brain print?
And I forget how they find out it's the old man and the...
Tara reveals.
Oh, Tara reveals.
Tara reveals that the old man was their father, that they both deposed, and then they fought over the throne.
Right. Tara takes the throne herself, cackling.
Must have planned all along.
Yeah.
So they go down to the basement. They're like, shoot, we got to check, and it's gone. Presumably, Servalan already took the brain print, or Travis. I think it's implied, actually, that Servalan took it. There's the implication in the story, actually, that Servalan is looking for Star 1 and doesn't know where Star 1 is because she also wants to control the Federation. when she's talking with Travis, Travis is like, imagine if we control the Federation, you and I, from Star One.
Yeah, but wasn't it already, maybe I'm wrong here, wasn't it already established that Servalan doesn't even know where Star One is?
I mean, yeah, I feel like it was, but I thought in Gambit, it seemed like she just wanted to find Darkly to stop Blake from finding out where Star One is. But in this, they make it out like Servalan and Travis want Star One for their own purposes.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think Servalan just had a bigger agenda in Gambit, which is maybe why it wasn't as focused. And maybe this is also maybe due to the weird shuffling of this season. So
possibly. I just thought it was interesting that Servalan is basically committing treason here.
Well, so I mean, she's gone around Federation regulations and rules before. It's
like a lot.
Yeah, a lot. We'll see where that takes her. But anyway, the father character is dying, and the fool is also, he's still down there because he was thrown in the dungeons before.
He starts singing a sad song about the king dying.
But the guy's last words to Blake are, "Fool knows nothing and everything," something like that.
Yeah, so Blake's like, well, he said a fool knows everything and a fool knows nothing, and he like looks at the fool. All of a sudden the fool song like swaps and he's like, the Star One coordinates are at blank, 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 and Blake's like, well, that was easy.
So it was hidden in like this guy's mind, and he was conditioned to repeat it on
the trigger
utterance
phrase
of this trigger phrase, which is a fool knows nothing and everything.
Right.
Or everything and nothing, whatever it was. So now they know. I liked how this was done, though. I just also want to point out that this is basically Dudley Simpson at his best. Mm-hmm. Or at least one of his best episodes that he did for Blake 7. I think he did all of the Blake 7 episodes except for like 1 or 2.
Right.
And I liked the sound in this scene too. When the fool starts talking in a computerized voice, there's a kind of creepy sound effect that goes along with it, and thought it worked really well.
I really liked this twist, though, that the old man was the king. I didn't see that coming at all because the whole story was building up to Rod being the one who had the brain pin.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden at the end, it's like, no, actually, it's this old man in the dungeon. And yeah, so they just beam up and they just leave. I think they just beam up and leave.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't remember any snarky, interesting lines at the end of this.
No, I don't either. I just remember Avon looking really disappointed when Callie wouldn't set the course to Servalan's ship. She's just like, no, Avon, I refuse. Avon's like, oh. Yeah, they beam up and Blake's like, oh, we've got the coordinates to Star One, let's go. That's kind of what happens.
Yep. I really liked this episode. This, to me, obviously they were looking for the codes, and there's the stuff going on with Servalan and Travis that wouldn't have happened in Series A because of the differences in how Servalan and Travis are really achieved in Series A versus B, which I want to talk about more next week. Mm-hmm. But a lot of this feels like a Series A episode. Like the stuff with Gola and like just the whole, vignette story with them and like the power struggle.
Yeah, it feels very different from all the other Series B episodes. Unique. It's definitely a lot more historical based than the other ones are, which I think is interesting because there's a lot more like rooted in history, similar to, we mentioned the episode of this, Bounty. Why? That is the only episode I can never remember the name to. Similar to Bounty in a lot of ways, but also really different because in this story it's not Blake and them running away from the Federation, it's them running just Servalan and Travis, who seem to have gone a little rogue. Yeah, Travis and Servalan actually barely show up in this story. They kind of just show up as side characters, which I really liked because we've had a lot of Servalan and Travis in the past couple of weeks, and I am almost 100% certain they'll be back next week.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's not even a spoiler to say that they will be.
Yeah, no. So I'm like glad that in this story they weren't the main villains. They were just kind of side characters. Yeah,
and I was planning on talking about this next week, but we're basically already touching on it here. In Series A, there's like actually a huge difference now that I think about it between Series A Servalan and Travis and Series B Servalan and Travis. Mm-hmm. Series A Servalan and Travis, and I know we mentioned this by the end of Series A, like when we watched Orak, like they felt like Saturday morning cartoon villains.
Right.
Because they brought them back in that style, right? They brought them back maybe every 2 episodes or so, and they would come up with like a new plan to stop.
New over-the-top, over-engineered plan.
And that was fine, like to introduce them, especially with Stephen Grief's Travis, who wasn't like, who didn't have as much like character development, and I kind of hesitate to say that, but character development as Brian Croucher's Travis. So that was okay for that season, and I actually liked how they established them in that way.
Right.
But Series B, they're they're main characters as much as the Liberator crew are.
Yeah, they are.
There's a story going on with Servalan and Travis at the same time as the stuff with Blake and Villa, Avon, Jenna, and Gan dying and stuff like that. Which is why in hindsight I'm okay with like them coming back every week after week after week. Having more, developing their story a little more every week and stuff like that.
I agree.
So and I think that there's stuff. This is also why I wanted to talk about it next week, because of what happens next week that I don't think you know about yet, so I'm not going to mention it. But I think because of stuff we're going to see next week, that had to be done.
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely something we can go into more depth next week on. I just wanted to mention that I really liked in this story they were more side characters than the main villains. Gola was the main villain of the story.
Yeah, I will say, like, at this point in the season, it's actually nice to have, like, this kind of Series A-esque episode, right, where it's like this, they go and there's like this conflict and they become a part of it.
Right.
So do you want to get into ratings here?
Yeah, why not?
Why don't you go first this time?
Okay. Yeah, I think I'll go first. My rating for this story is the name Rod in a universe populated by Olagagan and Kuravon. It's just like when you look at all the other names in the universe, seems kind of out of place. Kind of like how when you look at all the other Series B episodes, the story kind of stands out as being kind of different. Yeah. But, it works, right? You're not going to be like, oh, Rod, that's a terrible name. It's just out of place, right? But it's good. It fits the character, and like the story was good. Fits in. I mean, it's out of place in the aspect that, it's like Series A, but I think it was good. I mean, not great, but good. Like the name Rod in real life. Good, not great. Sorry to all the Rods listening to this podcast. I don't mean that.
All right. Well, I rated this one Travis ripping off his Siobhan mask because it's kind of a late game changer, right? It's kind of a surprise late in the game. Like, that was late in the episode. At the very sort of tail end of that episode, Siobhan rips off the mask and it's Travis underneath, and that sort of changes everything. And it's done really cool, and it's surprising. And this episode is like, it's really good. It's a surprise late in the season, and it's kind of different from what you've gotten up to that point, and really enjoyable.
I forgot Travis was in that. That means we've had, 4 Travis and Servalan episodes in a row?
Yeah, I think everything since Trial has had Travis and Servalan.
6 then.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, because even Pressure Point, Trial.
Oh, yeah, yep, everything since Pressure Point, because they weren't in Horizon. So everything since Pressure Point has had Servalan and Travis.
Trial.
Again, this...
Killer, Hostage, Countdown, Voice of the Past, Gambit.
No, they weren't in Countdown. Killer. No, they weren't in...
And they weren't in Countdown.
Were they in Killer? No.
No.
Okay, no, they weren't.
They weren't in Countdown either.
Yeah, they weren't in Countdown. But still, like, in hindsight, I'm still more okay with, like, them coming back in, like, a larger capacity because of the stuff we mentioned, a minute or two ago.
Right. You sure they weren't in
I'm pretty sure they weren't in Killer. Killer was the one with the
virus. You're right. It was Tynus in that one.
They called Servalan in that one.
They call Servalan. I was thinking of Tynus. Yeah, well, this is the third Servalan and Travis episode in a row, and then if they show up next week, that'll make it 4, right? Hopefully next season they can move a little bit away from Travis and Servalan. I'd like to see them introduce someone else, but that's something I want to talk about next week too.
Yeah.
So we did get an email this week from regular contributor and correspondent Sergeant Drano. So we'll go ahead and read that. The subject line is Dark Star, and hey guys, fell a little behind but catching up now. Just a quick note to let Keon know that the movie he was trying to think of a few episodes back was Dark Star, a student film and first film made by John Carpenter. Yeah, he did Halloween and Scream, as you note here in your parentheses, and Dan O'Bannon from Alien. They both wrote it. Carpenter directed, and O'Bannon was one of the main cast, playing Sergeant Pinback. Prophetically, in the movie, O'Bannon has an extended encounter with the alien, in quotes, lol. Great film, though often only appreciated after repeated viewings. I still find myself quoting it all the time. Sergeant Drano, Station 7, the door.
Yeah, thanks, because I totally blanked on what it was. And someone on Twitter actually, after that episode came out, reminded me of what it was. So, I went and looked it up, and admittedly, I was only like half paying attention when I watched it, which I almost never do. I almost never just have things playing on in the background. I'm usually tuned in, but for this one, I just did it. I was doing other things while watching it, so I really do want to revisit that movie and like actually pay attention, because I don't think I was picking up on a lot of what was going on.
I'm more impressed that people picked up what movie it was from your completely janky and screwball explanation. Just goes to show that there really are people out there who know everything about everything.
Yeah, I guess. And I guess they listen to Zenith now.
Yeah. I'm amazed. Okay, what also amazes me that someone who knew what that film was and could pick it up from your janky explanation listened to Zenith and then told us what it was. Both Sergeant Drano and the random Twitter commenter who apparently
I'm forgetting who it was, but
apparently figured it out. Right.
the
So
movie though.
yeah. So if you would like to email us, you can email us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Series B, anything Series B related as we come to a close you'd like us to talk about next week. And you can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Google Play at Zenith, a Blake 7 podcast. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And next time we finish up Series B with Star 1. But until then, the end.